The Human Rights Council is the UN's top human rights body, which is tasked to both articulate international human rights standards and also to measure states' compliance with those standards and review whether states are or are not measuring up to the expectations that the world's top human rights body demands. If the Philippines government maintains that it is respecting international law and the conduct of its so-called war on drugs, then it should have nothing to hide and should be open to and welcome, in fact, international scrutiny. Well, there's every reason to believe in the international processes, which are the only tools we have to hold governments to account, which are violating their international human rights obligations. The real question is can we trust the government of the Philippines to respect its international standards and to respect the repeated recommendations coming out of UN bodies that these concerns are real and that they need to be addressed. There is clearly a need for an independent international investigation into the killings. There is a need to hold those responsible to account. Of course, it's not the first time that the UN has had to face a government which is not respecting its international human rights obligations. And what we are seeing is that from a number of states expressing concerns, we are now facing a growing chorus of international concern, and from all regions of the world. From every single continent during the Philippines UPR, we heard states speaking out. Many of those states have bilateral relations with the Philippines, and the government is jeopardizing its good relations with governments around the world. It's jeopardizing its bilateral relations. It's jeopardizing its continued membership in the UN Human Rights Council if it fails to heed those calls and to heed the warning signals. Ultimately, in other contexts, we've seen the UN not just make recommendations for improvement of the human rights situation, but begin to identify individuals who are responsible for violations of international human rights law. If there are unlawful killings taking place, and it's clear that there are, then the UN can also begin to identify specific perpetrators, and those perpetrators should be made aware that they themselves can face international justice if they fail to heed the calls for an end to impunity. I think we've covered quite a lot of the most salient points. To me, what's most significant, I think, is that whereas the UPR is often a process for what's called peer-to-peer review, and states often, are fairly forgiving of the challenges that their counterparts face in different regions of the world. We are witnessing, I think, an increase in the expression of international concern, and that sends a very clear message to the Philippines that it is time to end the killings, end this murderous campaign, and ensure accountability. It's very, very rare that, in addition to all of the recommendations made during the UPR process, that you also hear such a strong message of condemnation and concern as was delivered through the joint statements recently. The fact that there were two joint statements at successive sessions of the Council, one in June on behalf of 32 states and then one in September on behalf of 39 states, shows that the concern is increasing, and that unless the Philippines heeds those calls, it will find itself facing increasing demands by the international community, including the Human Rights Council, to accept an international investigation or face the real possibility of being excluded from the Human Rights Council.
What would happen if these recommendations were not met within a specific period of time?
The Human Rights Council has a number of tools available to it and a number of options. We could see a resolution coming forward at a session of the Human Rights Council next year with more robust action. We could see the High Commissioner or the Human Rights Council move to put in place an international investigation. We could see individual perpetrators held to account before international tribunals or national or regional courts if they travel abroad. But I think what's most important is that the Philippines recognize that it's not too late to cooperate with the international community, to put an end to the killings, to put an end to the inflammatory rhetoric of the president, and to ensure that it complies with the international standards.